Well, good afternoon, good evening, and I think even good morning to all our friends, wherever you are. I wish to thank you all for being with us today for the opening meeting of our series, Women Talk About the Middle East, which is a part of our Living in Harmony project at the Wolf Institute, generally supported by the Shasha Foundation. I think we'll try to hear a very nice song that Linda chose for us, but I think we are short in time, so we'll skip this song and move directly to say that I'm delighted to start this series with a Baghdadi-born Israeli journalist and peace activist, Mrs. Linda Menuhin Abdul Aziz. But before we start this interview, I think we need a few words of historical context to this interview. In 568 BCE, yes, long time ago, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II destroys the first temple in Jerusalem and expelled the elite group of the Jewish nation and takes them with him to Babylon, just to make sure that the ruined land of Israel would remain so for a long time. Apparently, these exiles did very well in Babylon. They wrote the Babylonian Talmud, which is the most important text in Rabbinic Judaism, both in Jewish law and theology, and second only to the Bible, and their rabbinic scholars, the Geonim, were the highest religious leadership in the entire Jewish diaspora until the 11th century. Running fast forward to later centuries, due to nature calamities and wars, particularly during the 15th and 16th centuries, the Jewish population in Iraq had deteriorated significantly. However, only for a few decades. In the 19th century, this community flourished again, but at the same time, the tragic departure of the Jews from Iraq, soon to take place, started to show its first signs. And indeed, this process culminated with the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948, and between 1950 and 1952, most of the Iraqi Jews, 120,000 people, left mainly to Israel. Still, and for various reasons, between 6,000 and 10,000 Jews remain in Iraq, suffering for being a small minority, no longer the large, influential, and successful community they used to be, and additionally, carrying the burden of the success and prosperity of the new Jewish state, Israel. And here starts the story of our guest today, Linda Menuhin Abdul Aziz. So first of all, my dear Linda, I am delighted to have you here with us today. And thank you for agreeing to share with us your memories, your experience, and your insights into the Middle East in general, and into Iraq and Baghdad in particular. So again and again and again, thank you very much. We will have 25 minutes of interview, and then we'll have another 15 minutes for questions. So if you have any questions, our audience, please do send it in. So we would be able to organize it in a manner that most of the questions will be replied. So dear Linda, can we start with the first question?
Yeah. Well, your first question was really about my memories in Baghdad.
Yeah.
My early memories.
Yes.
And I can tell you that I have lovely memories. Unfortunately, we were not able to hear the song I sent you of Salima Pasha and Nadam Ghazali, which was really a lovely song. And I was very lucky to listen to this song in a henna party and when I was 12 years old. So you can imagine how a child feels being really so close to the Iraqi diva. Another nice memory is swimming in the Tigris. We used to hire a boat, like many other Iraqi Jewish families, every morning in the summer. And the boat used to come with us until we finish our swimming. So it was like heaven, really, until things started to deteriorate in terms of politics, obviously. I can share with you a small memory that shows probably how, as a child, I lacked, like many others, political understanding. And for example, when the revolution of 1958 broke, I was playing outside in the veranda, and practically the next day of the revolution, the army was still looking for Prime Minister Nuri. So my mother was so mad at me. She told me, "You have to go inside the house because the king was kicked out of his chair." So I told her, "Why doesn't he sit back in his chair, you know?" So I really didn't get it, that the whole system has changed. And indeed it has changed. The next question is, you wanted me to talk about what do I love about Arabic culture.
Arabic culture, yes, yes.
Well, I think it's fascinating to feel the warmth of the Arabic culture by and large, especially Iraqis. They are known for their fervor, which is called nahwa. That means you barely ask a question or ask for help, and everybody will jump and help you. And I felt this really when I embarked on looking for my father years afterwards. So I could feel it. Another thing from the Arabic culture, which I like very much, of course, is tradition and respect. Respect for the old. You have clear rules how to behave everywhere. So I remember, you know, when you get into a bus and there is an old lady, there is always a young man who will immediately stand up and offer his seat. So when I came to Israel, of course, the picture was different. But before talking about leaving to Israel, you were really asking about what made me make the decision to leave.
Yeah, and just a second, Linda, my dear, before we go to this question, when you talked about your the love for Arabic culture, you talked about the relationship between people. Let's talk a bit about the culture itself, about the music, about the poetry. Do you have any special love for this aspect?
Yeah, well, obviously, I love the Arabic music. I listen to Arabic music. I've established eventually an NGO to promote Iraqi Jewish music, and I just published a story about the Arabic music in Israel and how it has really developed. Poetry is another love, unbeatable, because, you know, the East is very well known for its love of poetry. The way they talk almost is poetry. It used to be like that mostly. So you know, I like always to use verses of poetry when I write and when I talk.
Linda,
so,
I know that from the
yes.
from the old generation, they used to learn by heart qasaid, which is the classical, and mushahat, the classical Arabic poetry. They used to learn it by heart on a regular basis. I was wondering if this habit was still on after the Jews left Iraq, like in the 50s, in the 60s. Was that still a strong element in the education system?
Well, it was an element in the education, probably not as strong as it used to be. because, you know, science has become more dominant in our times, and learning more languages, because we used to study French and English, and take many outside exams that are run by, in order to be accepted to universities abroad.
Yeah. So perhaps we should go to the third question is, when did you realize that this is the time to leave Baghdad? And when I ask you this question, I'm sure there are two parts for this question. The first one is, how did you feel when you made the decision in real time? And then afterwards, when you looked back in hindsight, how did you analyze this decision? And do you think it was a wise one?
Well, it's a great question. Actually, after the 6-day war, things really have turned very badly to Iraqi Jews. And all of a sudden, we found ourselves like scapegoats of the new Ba'ath regime. And soon, many Jews were arrested, and eventually it culminated in January 1969 with the hangings of 10 Jews, innocent Jews. So for me and for many other Jews, it was the beginning really of the end. They deprived us from all our rights as citizens. We were treated as fifth column, with so many restrictions in every aspect of our lives. So we were not admitted to universities, no work, not allowing Jews to sell properties, not to withdraw your own money from the bank if it exceeds 100 dinars a month. So yeah, we practically became hostages of the regime. And the worst of all was the incitement, unfortunately, against Jews, insinuating that we were the cause of the Arab defeat in the 1967 war. So for me, I was adamant to leave. I was deeply in love with my boyfriend, an Iraqi Jewish boyfriend, who left before me. So for me, I was counting the days and the hours to leave in order to join him in Israel, but things turned out differently. And so I came to Israel, and I had to face really many challenges in Israel.
So before we arrive to Israel, Linda, before we arrive to Israel, I mean, I want our audience to understand that when you say I left Iraq, what does it mean? It didn't mean that you took an airplane and had a direct flight Baghdad Tel Aviv in an hour. Leaving Baghdad and going to Israel was not a simple thing, to say the least. So a few words about your departure.
Yeah, okay, with pleasure. In order to leave, I had to run away. And in order to run away, I had to figure someone who will be willing to help me, because everybody knew that my father was a lawyer and he was against any illegal action, especially by his children. So finally, I found someone who was really very supportive, and he knew about my love story, so he was willing to help also. And we coordinated an escape whereby I had to disguise like an Arab woman, covering myself with abaya, with this black cloth, and traveling from one place to another. And we were lucky enough that we were not stopped by the police at the checkpoints, because as Jews, we were not allowed really to be away from home 80 kilometers, and that was hundreds of kilometers we were away. So with the help of the Kurds, they managed to smuggle us through the Iranian border
when you say
to
us,
Iran.
When you say us, you mean you and your brother?
Me and my brother, and we joined another Jewish family who were with us. So at least we were not all alone. And it was really a very frightening journey that I wouldn't take if it were today.
Ah, you wouldn't. You were not aware.
No, because it was very frightening. when you are young and you are highly motivated, it's different. You are ready to take risks. But you know, when you grow older, you tend to be more selective and yeah, more cautious in your judgment.
So in the early 1970s, you arrived to Israel via...
Right, 1971.
71.
1971, I arrived to Israel. And I find Israel very Western. And I come from a very Oriental culture. So many things differently, especially the freedom and democracy, because I'm not used to that. You know, I was haunted when I came to Israel. I used to really walk through the streets, and I used to look back if someone is following me. Actually, for 6 months I did that, because you know, I was so afraid. So the fear, really, I didn't get rid of it instantly, even though I knew that I'm you know, in a free country, I can do whatever I like. So this was obviously a surprise for me, this feeling of freedom, of not being persecuted. And but on the other hand, really, life in Israel was very tough at the time when I arrived.
Just before the Yom Kippur War. It's like 2 years before Yom Kippur War. It was a terrible situation in Israel, financially and politically. Yes.
3 years before Yom Kippur War. So it was different, even from the point of view, of course, of culture. Even you know, the culture is reflected also in the language. You know, when you talk in Arabic, you are you choose your words. It's very elastic. It's not very sharp and so straightforward. So I mean, unlike the Hebrew, because in Arabic you go around, it's totally different. So for me, it was a shock, because I used really to be very fragile and take it to heart. You know, if someone would say a word, which in Hebrew, you know, for Israelis, it didn't mean anything. But for me, it was like touching my feelings. So I was fragile at the beginning.
But at the same time, you went to the Hebrew University.
I went to the Hebrew University. In Baghdad also, I was at the university, and I had a great time at the university, apart from the fear from the Ba'ath Party and all the political atmosphere. And it's totally different. In Baghdad, the university is like a greenhouse. You feel comfortable. You feel you have friendly relations. Nobody has to rush to go to work while you are a student. In Baghdad, you are not paying for your tuition, and so everything, you know, is easier, and there is no rush. In Western cultures, you know, you have to work to make a living while you are a student. So it's totally different. So it has been really a lot of fun for me being in the university in Baghdad. While in Israel, it was very much challenging also because of the language and the way they study. So it's a totally different atmosphere and place, obviously.
Did you find the environment accommodating and helping, or you had to struggle on your own to find your way in the Israeli society?
Well, at the beginning it was tough, but once I mastered the language and I could get my way, I think it was obviously much more accommodating. Then there is a proverb in English that says, "Words of a feather stick together." So the first thing I did at the university is stick to students from Arab countries. At the time, there were many Jewish students who came from Lebanon, from Egypt, not only from Iraq. So, so it was really very supportive atmosphere, accommodating, and also very, very warm.
Yeah. We talked about the way you left Baghdad, but we didn't speak about a very painful and tragic event in your life, tragic loss of your father, who was an eminent lawyer, Yaqub Abdul Aziz, who was abducted in 1972. Please tell us a bit about this, and how did you feel then and now about it?
Yeah, it was really a shock at the beginning. When I heard that my father was abducted, first of all, because my father really was a loving man, and he was very supportive of all Iraqis, not only of Jews. He even liked better non-Jews than Jews. So for me, it was very hard to accept that because he was a Jew, he was abducted. At the end of the day, I had really to live up with the fact that he was not anymore with us. So I just decided since the beginning that I won't really look back and move forward in order to build a good future for myself. So that's what I did. I resumed my studies. I was incorporated in different positions, which I really like. I've been working with the Israeli radio, television, all the buzz spaces that I found myself very accommodating there. But it was really, the funny thing is this duality. Because I always say that I left Iraq, but Iraq never left me. On the other hand, I tried really not to think about my Iraqi identity. Everything was Iraqi about me. You know, I used to talk about Iraqi's history, about Iraqi food, about Iraqi culture, but I didn't consider myself as Iraqi. So the first thing really that I had to do is, first of all, to admit that I'm Iraqi, and I have to reconciliate, to make a reconciliation with myself. Because when I was mad at Iraq, I didn't want to hear anything about Iraq, even though I was a correspondent with the Israeli Broadcasting Authority, and I had to cover the Iraqi war that broke up in 1980, and for 8 years, I dealt with it without any feelings, as if I'm not Iraqi, as if I am a stranger to all these events, because I had to detach myself. But when the second war broke up and Israel was someone hurt by all the missiles in 1991, then really I started to suffer. I had a crisis, a life crisis at the time, because I was haunted by Saddam Hussein. And eventually I had really to cut my career in the television, because I didn't want to deal with the language, with the Arabic language, which was the language that I was working with. And I finally wanted to feel that I'm Israeli in all my heart. So that's why I left. And again, in 2003, Iraq was actually visiting me every day at home, because Iraq was in the news when the American troops invaded Iraq. So it was time really for me to reconcile with myself, and to look also at the news, at people who were being interviewed on television. I'm telling you, I was shocked. I was shocked to hear these terrible stories that happened to Iraqis, And all of a sudden, really, I felt that I am in a club of the victims of Saddam Hussein. That's how I felt, and I started to feel closer to Iraqis. Eventually, I embarked on this journey of following the traces of my father by meeting people whom he knew and who were living in Europe and the USA, in order really to understand the situation better. And finally, really, it helped me to appease myself and also start to build bridges with other people, because I was able also to see the tragedy of all the Iraqis. It wasn't only our tragedy. It's true that Iraqi Jews have suffered, and the suffering really didn't stop when we left Iraq, because, you know, some people have been psychologically hurt. And we have one example in our family, and unfortunately, it was a big, really pain, I would say.
Can you tell us, I'm sure you have many stories, but can you tell us one particular story about reconnecting with Iraqis in Baghdad, and how did you find it? Did they collaborate immediately? Was it a mutual need to reconnect and to revive the past coexistence?
Yeah, of course. I can tell you that the first time I went to London in SOAS to show my film, and the hall was full of Iraqis from different denominations: Arabs, Kurds, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Mandaeans, whatever you can think of. And for me, it was a lifetime experience at the time, because we immediately connected, and they immediately identified with my pain, and I did the same thing. It was really reciprocal. And all of a sudden, I had this feeling of what a tragedy the rule of one man has brought upon Iraq. Because, you know, when I compare Iraq to the times of in the 50s, and it was like heaven for everybody. Even now in the pictures, when you look at the pictures and you see how developed Iraq was at the time, you know, also the contribution of Jews at the time, that is still remembered in Iraq. They don't forget it. You know, whenever I meet an Iraqi, they tell me, oh, the Jews have promoted so much the Iraqi music and also the Iraqi economy. Until today, people know who is Sasson Hussein. Who would believe it? I mean, he
he was
not with us since the early 30s. Yeah.
He was the best finalist of Iraq.
Yeah. So now in Iraq, they are hoping for another Sasson Hussein to come and save Iraq from whatever it's undergoing now. So I think, you know, now also you can feel the relationship with Iraqis also on the social media, of course. There are so many pages on Facebook connecting with Iraqi Jews, and Iraqi Jews connecting with non-Jews. So I think it's an epidemic. It's really very, very common, and we, you know, we share everything. We have not only values that we share, but also, you know, our history, places where we cherish the food, the music, the language. So, yeah.
Do you think that
we have a lot. Hello, Tinkan.
Linda, do you think that
Yeah.
the peace with the Emirates, between Israel and the Emirates, would have any effect on a possibility, I'm very cautious here, of creating some kind of a peace with Iraq? And how do you view the power of the people, the ordinary people in both countries, to promote this type of a move, if it's possible at all?
Well, you will be surprised, Merav, that indeed many Iraqis are very much looking forward to having peace with Israel. I always said that for me, it's not only a milestone in the history of Iraq when Iraqis used to be afraid even of mentioning the word Israel unless you will be marked as a spy. So nowadays, Iraqis are really, many of them are longing to have relations with Israelis and with Israel. And this emanates really from a couple of reasons. First of all, Iraqis are fed up with terror, so they share with Israel the suffering from terror. The other thing is that they are looking at the peace treaties that other Arab countries already have with Israel, and in order to promote the economy and in order for the well-being of the citizens. So they are asking actually why Iraqis cannot really have peace with Israel, because Israel has the technology, Israel is very developed, and we know the Iraqi Jews who can be a very good bridge. Iraqi Jews can come to Iraq and really make a difference. Also, we don't forget that there are many holy sites in Iraq for the Jews. And this could be really a source of income for the Iraqis if they will be developed. I'm sure, Jews from all the world would like to come and see really the history of Jews, not of Iraqi Jews only. So there is a lot in common, and also they think that the Palestinian problem should be solved between Israel and Palestine. And Iraq has suffered enough in this field. So this is how they feel, and they express their feelings everywhere you can see. But obviously, some of them are afraid to talk about this subject because Iran has a very deep hold on the Iraqi scene nowadays. So their hope is if Israel can have relations with Iraq, at least Iraq will get some, not only not only protection, but their relations will be more, how do you say, in equilibrium, more balanced, yeah, more balanced. Yeah, this is the word. So in many ways, the peace with Israel can serve them, and they are talking about that loudly. I can tell you that on the page of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that I run, the Israel in the Iraqi dialect, people are sending their passport and writing on a piece of paper near it, "We want peace with Israel, no more war." Also, Iraq doesn't have any conflict with Israel regarding boundaries. So there is really no reason for this conflict at all.
Except for the
this mantra is also from, we are hearing from other Arabs around the world, not only from Iraqis, obviously. This is giving really a great hope to the people here that finally they could focus on their future and develop their economy. because
Do you think they have enough power to influence the government policy, or it's only between them?
well, I'm sure that this will be taken into consideration because now you can see that it's people to people. I mean, unlike the peace we had beforehand with Egypt and Jordan, which was peace between governments. So now what we are talking is peace, people to people peace. And this is what's really very exciting, even in the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain. And interestingly enough, a survey was conducted and published yesterday by an American company about the inclination, how popular peace is in Arab countries. And I'm telling you, I was amazed to see that 58%, 59% in Egypt, in Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, and in the United Arab Emirates support peace. I think this is extraordinarily also encouraging.
Indeed, indeed. So how do you view the Middle East in 10 years' time? I know it's a very difficult question, but give it a try.
Well, first of all, Merav, I'm very optimistic. I can see how the Middle East now is unraveling. So this week we are having talks with Lebanon under the auspices of the United States, for example. So this really leads me to believe that the Arabs worldwide have come to the conclusion that Israel is not the enemy. This is number one. The second thing is that having relations with Israel can promote the Arab populations worldwide because of technology and because of all the know-how that Israel now has, be it in water issues, in agriculture, in cyber. So Israel can really promote all these economies. And also, since Iran is the mutual, the common enemy, so you feel more secure when you ally with friends, of course. And since Iran is against Israel, so the enemy of your enemy is your friend. That's how we say it in Arabic. And I can tell you that what is surprising, that because of all the pages of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that Israel is running in Arabic, the Arabs finally really have uncovered the true face of Israel, realities that were ignored by the Arab media. So now they understand what does it mean to be a democracy in Israel, how Arabs can vote in the elections, how we have Arab parliamentarians in the Knesset, what is equality about, how we have 17% of Arabs, for example, doctors. For every two pharmacists, we have one Arab and one Jew. So all these really realities were hidden from the eyes of the Arabs throughout, tens of years, because Israel was labeled as the enemy, and Israel was equal to the evil. So,
Wow.
so now people really, you wouldn't really believe it, what people write to us about Israel. Someone, Israel is a lighthouse in the Middle East, the true democracy that cares about people. These are Arabs writing to us. what else can I tell you? Someone even called, Prime Minister Bibi to come and free Iraq from Iran. You have really lots of responses that are very, very surprising about Israel. Not the least, they would like to come and live in Israel if there is an opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so Linda, I'm afraid we are short in time, and there are some questions. So let's start with a very interesting question by our friend Emil Cohen from London.
Yes.
I'm very, very glad that he's with us. Thank you, Emil. That's a great pleasure to know that you are watching this discussion. So Emil asked, can you really believe that peace between Arabs and Israel can be achieved ignoring the Palestinian question, which has been in the forefront of Arab politics from the 70s odd years?
Well, even though I didn't hear the first part of the question.
I can't see you, Linda.
Sorry. About the Palestinian question, I truly believe that now with the growing peace with more Arab countries, there will be more matters at stake with Israel. So we have a bigger pie to share, and there is more to will and deal with. That's why I'm really optimistic. Also, the Palestinians now have to realize that it's time really to be practical, because even Israel, after the 181 United Nations resolution, the Israelis were not that happy with what the resolution stated, but they had to accept. So I think now they realize that they don't have the support of other Arab countries, because other Arab countries are also busy with their own problems, and the Palestinians can really gain from the growing peace with other Arab countries. This is my true belief.
So we are coming to our end. So if you have any positive and happy message with few sentences, we will be all very happy to listen.
Yeah, first of all, I really believe that in 10 years' time, I believe that we have good chances of having peace with more Arab countries, and even Iraq, Lebanon, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, Morocco, and probably more countries will join. This is one thing. The other thing is that I still dream of being the Israeli ambassador to Iraq one day.
Inshallah, that will be great. We have here many people who thank you for this talk, including Lily Shor and Odette Matzliach and others. Thank you so much for this wonderful interview, and inshallah soon we will all be visiting Baghdad and have direct flights from Tel Aviv to Baghdad. Thank you very much, Linda, and to all of you, a very good evening, and thank you for being with us today. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.